And so we're in for another episode of the Manufacturing Margin. And my guest is Andrew Collier, who is a expert in manufacturing and automation, and is currently focusing on kitchenry and the ability for your appliances to know what you're thinking and whether that you really should have another donut. Uh, but Andrew, why don't you tell a little bit of what experiences brought you to this place of understanding what really makes people money?
Absolutely. So, the old adage that sales cures everything. I've been in sales my entire life. My father and my mother were both in sales, so it came very naturally to me. I've been in sales in a lot of different areas. My family runs an industrial steam heating business, so very familiar with the production side of things. Everything made here in America. But then, I'm also had a lot of opportunities to deal with overseas manufacturers, contract manufacturers, everything related to, near shoring and the opportunities there. So, I've always loved tech and, been adjacent to it in some sense, whether that was, fintech, automotive tech, industrial tech, as I said. And, I really found my home with kitchenry because it's consumer tech. So it's a little bit more, sexy or glamorous, but you still get the hard-nosed engineering in a lot of the aspects of what we're trying to create, which is, a wireless power ecosystem. So you don't have to plug things in anymore, which I think is a win for everybody.
Well, I mean, and it exposes that whole piece that's more and more important for manufacturers, distributors, and everybody who's, in this hybrid world, where again, you might be a manufacturer, you might be a manufacturer who's almost skewed into distribution because all your manufacturing is happening offshore, right?
Right.
Um, and but the issue really is that communications piece, right? And
Absolutely.
the ability for production to know what sales is doing, for the ability for purchasing to know what is driving sales. I mean, where you have advanced algorithms for demand forecasting and stuff that's based on like what you're bringing up with the appliance world. I mean, I think I could see this where you know the data coming in from your toaster basically goes right into the R&D shop and changes the way the thing is designed next Thursday. It's like,
Absolutely. Real-time feedback from devices is something that has been around in the IoT world for a while. It's been slightly adopted. You have a lot of different business cases. So the one you just mentioned to know like who, what, where, what features they're using is on the consumer side, but there's many other applications. So energy management is a huge one for us, especially in places where electricity is not ubiquitous. So like in RVs, on boats, in planes. And so understanding what business case that adds value to that customer is really where I think the expertise comes into play.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and that just brings up like, we were talking about this before, but it's like for all that it's marketed as that IT is sort of a done deal and it can just be implemented to everybody and sold in boxes, the place of this that especially for small manufacturers and people who are scaling from coming from 30, 40, 50 years ago, right, where everything was on paper, and we've sort of gotten into the new world, but are reticent, and they don't always see all of the advantages. And it right now, which the pieces of this which I like to bring up, which is really to expose liabilities that aren't talked about. They aren't on the books, but between being hacked, between just losing your tribal knowledge and not being able to know because the principal involved got sick or something like that. You can completely hamstrung a small medium sized business. When you have such reliance on key players.
Absolutely. And from my own experience, and the businesses I've worked at, which have mostly been small businesses, that's exactly what happens. It's like, oh, Dale from accounting's not in today, so the books aren't getting published till Monday. So definitely very big on identifying the risk factors, especially with your human capital piece. I am reserved when it comes to over reliance on tech, just because, I'll take sales for example. Now, if your computer's down or the Wi-Fi's down, sales guys, look at it as a day off, and I'm like, well, you have a phone, and if your cell phone's not working, you better find a landline or you better go knock on some doors. Now, I'm very aware that sales has changed and people don't like cold calls and this, that, and the other. But until you try it and go do it, you never know. And some of my biggest clients and biggest investors have come from happenstance situations where it wasn't a pitch competition, it wasn't a venture forum or anything like that, but it was me sitting in a restaurant, talking to my neighbor or my friend about what's going on, someone overhearing and saying, well, that sounds interesting, like this is what I do, you think there's an opportunity here? So I don't rule out the human chaos piece, because I think that's a very valuable asset in
Right.
the digital world. There's a funny, like, futuristic story, and it says, well, when the AI takes over and the AI is fighting the AI, the only way to gain an advantage is put a human in the cockpit. Because it's chaotic, right? We don't run off of the universal algorithm, if you will. So I am one, as we talked about earlier, to believe in human intelligence first and augment it to much of our ability before we just outsource all our thinking to the large language models or whatever AI is going on now.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that just exposes, one of the key things in automation, and certainly successful automation and getting any sort of a margin, which is you've got to do that planning step where you actually analyze what optimal workflow is. And
Absolutely.
it's the step that so many folks miss, and they don't want to spend for it, and they don't have internal talent half of the time or staff to do it.
So
So you've got to get help. It's like,
absolutely. I think a good use case for this kind of study is AWS IoT Core. When I was in the software sales world of IoT, the biggest argument that we saw from our customers was, are we going to build it or are we going to buy it? And so AWS IoT Core is very much marketed as, okay, just buy these basic tool sets and you're going to have a product online in less than a week. Well, then they found the reality of what it actually takes to maintain, that entire, if it's a VPC or cloud instance, what it takes to do all the security, stay update, pen test regularly, what happens if you lose communication with one of your devices, provisioning, and all that stuff. So, as you stated, IT is very much packaged as a thing, but it's actually a verb. It's ongoing all the time,
right.
and people still think in the static because they haven't moved to the dynamic.
Right. I mean, and the thing is that's such a loss. I mean, the people who are still going like, oh, it's an expense, and it's like, let me nail down the cost and we'll just get that over here.
Uh,
And it's like, you don't understand. This is like having a child. This is like you've just gotten another brain. I mean, use the tool.
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
and that's part of what drives me crazy. I mean, having been one of those people who, I taught myself to program in 1980, and it's like, and the idea of what this can impact, how the big impact that this has on small businesses when you can take control of this. You don't have to go like, yeah, we did get that, but it doesn't include all these other things that we do. And so we've still got 35 spreadsheets, and Bob is the only one who knows how to run them. And, it's like,
Yeah, I think an often mishap amongst business owners is they only look at one side of IT. So they're like, oh, we need email server, we need a website, and then they completely, like, don't think about the back end at all. Like, oh, how are all of our CRMs integrating or stuff like that? And what I found, at least among smaller businesses, is they just don't have the resources or the wherewithal to do that. Like what I've seen, at least most businesses around here, they have some local IT guy to make sure that their messages are sending, and that's pretty
right.
much the extent of what they're doing. They're not implementing anything to make their engineers more efficient, or they're not implementing anything to. I mean, ChatGPT is a great example. Very simple. They're not writing emails that way. They're not writing basic reports that way. Um, I have my reservations with ChatGPT, but there's zero doubt saying that it is a useful tool for a lot of manual tasks. And I think what we're going to see is a lot of legacy manufacturing businesses that unfortunately have been, in that lane for like since World War II, really are going to fall by the wayside. Now there's a lot of geopolitical factors changing that, nearshoring, bringing manufacturing home, whatever. But the reality is if a business is much more efficient than you, it's only a matter of time.
It's true. I mean, but that I think that that's still something that has to really be heard by these older characters who were designer sellers, and we had a client who, you know, did very complex medical labeling, and so the configuration process of understanding all the characteristics that were involved of doing this correctly so you can quickly come back with an estimate and um uh, get to your people properly. The thing is not to imagine that just because an email system's there, or you know other pieces of these modules are there, it's replaced the human being who really understands how to walk down the shop floor and understand if everything's on time or not just by looking at it.
Right, right. I think the one of the most famous stories is probably the Gigafactory when it came out for Tesla, because he tried to do everything automated and then found out that there are a lot of jobs that humans still do much more efficiently than computers and nimbly. I mean, Optimus is going to be a really big step for humanoid robots, I believe, but until it walks, talks, acts, communicates, and can move this the same way we do, I don't see that being a major replacement in the labor force anytime soon, especially outside of the factory. Like if you're working in like HVAC, for example, and you're fixing somebody's air conditioning outside, well, there's a lot more complex commands that go into that environment than they do in the controlled factory environment.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, for all that you can have controlled scenarios which an algorithm can easily manage, you've got so many still unidentified variables where you end up with sort of black swan effects, of
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's what's happening in the automation. Like Factory 4.0 has been a general concept for at least the last 20 years, and a lot of people thought that we were going to have these great machines that build the machines that were going to be basically humanless, and we haven't seen that manifest. We've seen a lot of telemetry, we've seen a lot of feedback, predictive maintenance, proactive maintenance, uh, you know, uh, bringing information back from the field to help the production process. But by no means have I seen any factory that's online right now be completely without human intervention 24/7. Because I mean, even if you don't have people there working on the data, there's still people maintaining the stuff, or they're troubleshooting or programming from a distance. So it's not the jobs at which humans are doing for the machines that are changed, but it's not like we're being replaced entirely.
right. No, no. I mean, and anybody who again is in that area as a small medium manufacturer, there's no piece of you getting rid of your humans. This is really almost always about how do I scale so I can use my people more efficiently. And again, now I can get a better margin on something.
Yeah,
I expand my market. We become more efficient in our purchasing, methodologies or whatever.
absolutely. I think that is one of probably the major benefits that is sort of goes unnoticed is how much automation goes into the backside of the business, not just producing the things, but the purchasing that you said, and how much more readily available it makes the information. I mean, I know we've all been Google searching for 20 years now, but just think about back in the day when you had to, take an hour and go through the catalog and then find all the parts. Now
Right.
I can compare every single part in real time, find the exact make and model that I need, who makes it, where they make it, how many they have available, and then any other relevant information that I need. So that alone is making you so much more efficient. And people don't realize those small changes make drastic differences at scale.
Right, right. I mean, even as when you look at the cost of acquiring a new customer these days, with, as you said, people won't answer cold calls. It's a very strange world in terms of what sales and marketing is in some ways. But it's like when you think of how much it took to acquire a good customer, the risk of potentially spoiling that or ruining an order or something, this is again an incredible liability, much less again not identifying that some of your customer base aren't even making you profit, and you either better address that or fire
Absolutely. When you were speaking earlier about false data, I've experienced that more times than I'd like to count. And we have uh, a sort of a coin term or coin phrase that we like to use. It's that no information is better than misinformation. I'd rather make the decision from less variables than have a wrong variable
them.
input.
Totally, totally.
Yeah. So try. We call it information slimming, or as Elon says, first principles. Find out the like 3 or 4 most relevant factors, and you probably have about 90 to 95% of what's going to move the needle. Now, and then the rest of that is just skill and due diligence, which I think people are lacking severely because everything is so easily available that they don't want to go to the second page, or they don't want to read the 30-page book, or they don't want to scroll down just a little bit farther. And so I think due diligence is probably another area that's ripe for innovation, but also something that I hope will help augment humans, because it's a laborious process. Like, you can't know something about everybody until you search everything that's associated with them. And
And you also, I mean, I always would love this, that I could get out of the job of being an intelligent person, but the fact is critical thinking is not going to suddenly be done by computers. You've
mm-mm,
got to find a lot more humans who want to be critical thinkers if we want to have a real economy that works without harm, and where you're running a company where it doesn't either kill the operators, the owners, or the customers.
right, right, absolutely. Don't have much to add there. I think the key is probably just incentives alignment. What I've seen a lot of businesses, and businesses have gotten better with like ESOPs and giving stock options to employees and things like that. But what I've seen is a lot of miscommunication between the labor and the management. Is labor's like, well, we should do it this way because this is going to get more product out the door faster, and management's like, well, that's not going to hit my metrics for the month, so we're not going to do that. And keeping the value system aligned the whole way down, I think, is one of the tough challenges. One of the great quotes I heard one time is, the best you can hope for as a business owner is making everybody's salaries transparent, and every single person in your company looking at the board and saying, that seems fair.
Right,
That's
right.
the best case scenario, because no one's ever always going to be happy. It's impossible. And that's something that you have to prepare for as a very tough conversation as a business owner.
But I mean, that comes down that piece, which is strategy, and like you were
Mhm.
saying, the due diligence of it, where it's really critical that you are looking at this from the standpoint of, well, I think we've done a good job on this and exposed some really important things. So thanks very much for your time. And I think we'll certainly have more that we could come back to on this.
Absolutely. We've been launching our first product in September 30th. So maybe, when we're officially out in the marketplace, we can, do a little demo, talk a little bit about how we got here, and then the products that we're bringing out next.
Great. Sounds good.
Well,
All
I
right. Well,
appreciate
thanks
that.
for your time.
Thank you, Mark. You have a wonderful day. Appreciate it.